guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to watch today's video. And guys, today we're going to be giving tips and advice on how to work and how to fish a small swim bait here. You know, at the time of filming this video, we're just almost into the month of December, and December, January, and February are some of the best months of the year to fish these little finessey swim baits like the 3-inch models. And there's quite a few different things that you can do to them to help you guys catch more fish on them. Anywhere from how to rig them correctly to how to work them and how to put action on them, that type of stuff. So we're going to get into all the details of how to fish a little swim bait in today's episode. And also, guys, we'll be talking about the Megabass Spark Shad today with the okashira jighead. This is my favorite little swim bait setup. I'll link all this in the description of my Tackle Warehouse link if you guys would like to pick some of them up there at Tackle Warehouse. They got the big Black Friday sales going on now. It's a good time to get stocked up. And also, guys, we do also have the Black Friday sale going on my Swimbait Signature Series sunglasses. Right now, you can get them at 50% off. That's right, half price right now. I'll put the Swimbait link in the description of the video. And if you use the promo code RandyB with a capital R, capital B, you get free shipping and handling. So appreciate all that, guys. Really grateful everybody's been taking advantage of all that. Okay, guys, little swim baits like this, these things are freaking deadly. They've been probably some of the most popular baits over the last couple of years for traditional bass fishing and for guys that are using it with their electronics. This is probably the #1 type of a bait, you know, those little jighead minnows. This is not a jighead minnow like they use for live scope, and this is actually a swim bait with the little paddle tail on it. Big difference with this. And this one here it's the 3-inch Megabass Spark Shad, and I've got the 1/8 ounce okashira jighead that I painted red on there. So first of all, I want to talk a lot about how you want to fish these things, as far as how you want to work them. But the first thing that you have to do is you have to rig them correctly, because one of the things about a little swim bait is if you don't rig it right, the baits just don't work that good. So let's get into a little bit about some tips and advice on how to rig this thing up right. Now, this is the head I use, guys. This is the Megabass okashira jighead. It's got the fish head design on it. It's got a nice nano coated hook on it, small diameter yet really stiff. It's got a nice keeper. Again, I'll link this in my Tackle Warehouse link. And I've painted it red. A lot of times I just like a red head. It's just a confidence thing. But one of the keys when you're rigging a little swim bait here is you've got to get the thing rigged straight. I mean, you cannot rig it off to one side, even the slightest. So a couple different things. First of all, when you come in like this, don't just come in through the center of the whole body, because let me show you an example. If you try to come in like the center of the body and run your hook out, look at the bite, look how much bite gap that you have right there. Now, if you rig it correctly, you want to come through the top of the swim bait. So run it through like this, and then just try to stay as close. See the hook there? You can see the hook right there. I've almost got it coming out of the bait. It's just barely below the plastic. And if you rig it like that, you're going to get a lot more of a bite gap in the thing. In other words, you're going to have more of a opportunity to hook the fish. So when you rig it correctly like that, you can notice how much more of the hook. You got probably another 1/16 of an inch of bite gap there by rigging it right, just barely into the surface. And it's really important to make sure that you come right through the middle of the bait there, because if you don't come through the middle of the bait, a lot of times the bait will roll to its side a little bit when you're reeling it in there. So coming through the middle is really critical there. Also, line test is really critical. One of the things about it is most people fish too heavy a line. I get a lot more bites on a little swim bait, guys, if I fish it with 6-pound tests. So I use 6-pound tests, Seaguard and VizX fluorocarbon. Some people use 8, but there's a huge difference. It's like if you throw this little swim bait on 8-pound test line and then you throw it on 6-pound test line, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have so much better feel with the 6-pound test line. The diameter is slightly smaller, but it makes a big difference on this presentation. And also, by going to the 6-pound test line, you will be able to cast probably about 15 to 20% further, maybe not 20, but maybe 15% further with the 6-pound test line than the 8-pound test. So you can make a longer cast, you got better feel on it. I just think you get more bites. So 6-pound test, fluorocarbon line, straight fluorocarbon. You don't want to use the braided fluorocarbon setup. That thing is worthless in my opinion. Just go straight fluorocarbon, 6-pound test. Also, guys, when you're looking, I don't want to make this sound like a plug, but man, if you're looking for a good spinning reel at a good price right now, this Lew's Hypermag spinning reel, I've been using this thing for about 2 months now. Love it. I'll put that link in the description there. And they got the big Black Friday sale if you guys want to try one out. Coupling up, I've got it on the Megabass Whip Snake spinning rod, 6'11" medium action. That's another thing about it, is you want some type of a medium action spinning rod. You don't want it too soft and you don't want it too stiff. So you want a bend in your rod, just about like that. You know, a nice little flex on there, but still have enough backbone. Now this flex on there does two different things. Number one, it allows you to make that little bit longer cast. It is a little bit more forgiving on the hook set and fighting the fish also. When you get a quality fish on a 6-pound test line, having this give on the tip is a really big factor in order to get that fish in and wear it down more. So that's the setup with it. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about working the thing. So this is a big deal with it also. In my swim bait fishing, especially for this time of year, there's two different ways that I like to present the swim bait, depending upon how the fish are set up. There's two different scenarios. It's gonna be a scenario for fish that are hugging the bottom, and then a scenario for the fish that are suspended. Now, when I'm swim bait fishing, there's two primary structures that I fish. Number one, this time of year, is the middle of the ditches. So best way to explain this, guys, is if you go back into one of the major creek arms that you're fishing, and you know how there's little coves on almost any major creek arm, you got coves off those creek arms. Go back in some of those coves and go about halfway back in them until the water gets about 30, 35 foot deep. And once it's 30 or 35 foot deep, as long as you have water visibility over about 2.5 or 3 foot, 4 to 5 foot is ideal, but you really need water visibility over 2.5 or 3 feet. Just start casting right down the middle, you know, literally right down the middle of the ditch. And I'll cast it out there, and there's two different ways I'll fish it based upon how much activity I'm seeing on my depth finder. If I'm not seeing much activity on the depth finder, I cast it out there, let it go to the bottom, and just start slow cranking it, just like that. But if I do see some bait fish, say I'm seeing bait fish suspended in different, you know, depths of the water column, I'll throw it out there, I'll count it down to the depth that I'm seeing most of the bait fish, hold my rod tip high, and just a slow medium retrieve like that. That's one way. Second way that I fish it, probably more than anything else, that the ditch fishing, I probably only do maybe 20% of the time. 80% of the time, I'm concentrating on nothing but in and around main lake and secondary points. And I don't necessarily mean fishing just on the point itself. I'm talking about fishing maybe 100 yards leading up to a point, and then 100 yards as you go around it. So let's say, for example, I got a nice point that I can see on the lake there. I'll start on the left-hand side of the point about 100 yards before the point, which is usually a bank. You know, bank can be different slope angles, but I'll start working down, maybe not 100 yards, maybe 50 yards. Let's say 50 yards before I get to the point, because a lot of those fish, they're moving in and out of those points almost like a highway. So you can catch a lot of those fish on these areas before you get to the point. A lot of people pass that up. They just concentrate right on the point, but always start about 50 yards before the point. And what I normally do in this situation is I cast it out there, let it hit the bottom, and once it hits the bottom, I'll slow crank it for maybe, 5 or 6 cranks. And what happens is the swim bait, as you're cranking it, once it hits the bottom and you start cranking it, it's gonna come off the bottom a little bit. After I crank it about 5 or 6 cranks, I'm gonna let it fall back down to the bottom. Then I'm gonna crank it, 3 or 4 or 5 times like that, let it sink to the bottom. So in essence, what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep this bait less than a foot off the bottom. So it's on the bottom, we'll crank it 3 or 4 times, it comes up about a foot at the bottom, and I'll let it fall back down. I don't want it to get over about a foot off the bottom. This is gonna be the way that I'm gonna catch those bass that are hugging the bottom. And how do you know if they're hugging the bottom? A lot of times you don't see any bait fish or fish activity on the point when you graph it. Now, I only use 2-dimensional sonar, so the approach that I use is I'll graph around those points first of all, and I'm gonna see if I notice any shad suspended out off the bank on the points. Sometimes you'll see shad in various depth zones depending upon how clear the water is. If I don't see much shad activity, that is when I'm fishing it on the bottom. But if I do see shad activity, I try to take note of the primary depth that I see the shad, and I'll do the same thing. I'll cast it out there, and say, for example, my boat's in 25 or 30 foot of water, and I see shad 10 or 15 feet down. I'll count it down, maybe to 10 or something like that. Keep my rod tip high and just slow crank. I don't let it drop back down. I just slow crank it like that. And I'm wanting to keep the bait above the bait fish. So take note of that. If you notice that your bait fish are down about 15 feet, try to keep the bait maybe 10 foot, 3 to 5 foot above the bait balls there. The fish, they really prefer to come up on a bait. They don't really like to go down on a bait if it goes past the shad school quite as much. So I'm always wanting to keep it above it like that. And this is a technique that is one of the most consistent producers under a wide range of situations. A lot of techniques for bass fishing, they work good in, windy conditions, calm conditions, cloudy, sunny, or whatever. They're more conducive to that. But a little swim bait, especially when that water temperature is in the 40s or the 50s, it'll produce under any condition. Windy days, calm days, cloudy days, sunny days. It's just a really good technique to catch them. Super, super finessey. Colors are not really that big of a deal. There's so many different color options in little swim baits now that it's confusing. But as long as you got any type of shad pattern, just in any type of thing that looks like a shad, any pearl looking like this, or creamy or white, you can't go wrong with that. If the water has got a little bit more stain to it, or if it's cloudy, I'll go to a little bit brighter one, like the milky looking color here. And then I'll tone it down a little bit to more subtle color if it's brighter out and the water's really, really clear, or if you don't have much wind on it. But one other thing, guys, I'll wrap it up with this. The hook set on a little swim bait is critical too. Since you're dealing with a fine wire hook and a light line, 6-pound line, when you're casting it out there and you're reeling it and you get the bite a lot of times it loads up. It's like it's not a hard strike. It's just you'll be reeling it, and all of a sudden it just feels like something's heavy on there. So when you get a bite like that, resist the urge to set the hook like that. Just, I talk about this all the time. You get that bite like that, just start cranking faster. Maybe pull back a little bit, but don't rear down and set the hook on it. You'll land a lot more fish by just start cranking faster and pulling into it than you will setting that hook like that. So anyway, guys, just a little bit of a swim bait primer there coming up. Like I said, best time to fish a little swim bait is anytime the water's in the 40s or the 50s, especially between November and March. That's the prime period of the year. Really good way to catch them. Hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.